All right, and so we're to our final strategy already, which is kind of crazy, at least on my end. These are going really, really fast. But strategy number 4, split the fraction apart. And again, I apologize if you can't read this top line very well, but in the picture version, it should be pretty decent. And it's also the last strategy that's in your packet. So we'll do one example on here, and then again, there should be another one in the examples on the next page of your packet as well. So when do I use splitting the fraction apart? Well, I use it anytime I can. So anytime I have a fraction and I look at it and the top has a plus or a minus up here, and I can separate them into separate fractions, a lot of times that's going to be a really good thing. Okay, and here's a really good example of it because you can kind of see it right away. If I can separate this out, I notice that these guys should cancel. Okay, but I can't just cancel them right away because this secant isn't just the denominator for this guy, it's the denominator for both. Okay, so as I go through it, I'm going to take it apart. I'm going to make sure that it's the denominator for both. So I'm going to do secant x over secant x. So it's the denominator for this guy minus cosine x over secant x. Okay, so it's the denominator for both, so I made it the denominator for both. Okay, which lets me do what I wanted to do. Okay, it lets me take these two guys and cancel them. So it's kind of the reverse. It actually is the reverse of strategy number 3, where we made a common denominator to put them into one fraction for strategy 3. We can also do the opposite thing here. Get those guys to cancel. This piece right here, in the packet, it kind of skips and assumes that you know something that you probably aren't comfortable with yet, so I'm not going to skip the step that they did. I'm going to look at this fraction over here, and I'm going to say, okay, well, what is secant? Because cosine is cosine, that's good. Well, what is secant of x? Well, secant is 1 over cosine. Okay, so I'm going to do the first strategy. I'm going to substitute in. I'm going to take this out and put in 1 over cosine. Okay, and I'm going to use things that I've already used once or twice already. Okay, so I'm dividing by a fraction, which is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Okay, so that's the same as that right there, which is how they get 1 minus cosine times cosine, which is cosine squared. Okay, so that's where they got this piece from. It's by multiplying by the reciprocal after substituting in. Okay, so they skipped a couple algebra steps. I didn't really like that, but that's how we get to that point. Okay, and then you look at this, and again, this is already much simpler than this was, but you can go a little bit further because you have a 1 and a squared. Anytime you see a 1 and a squared, you should be looking Pythagorean. So find the one that's got 1s and cosine squareds, and that is the top one. So how do I get 1 minus cosine squared in the top one? Well, I move this guy over to here. I subtract this guy over to here. Okay, if I do that, the one side is just going to be sine squared. I subtract this over to here. That'll be 1 minus cosine squared. Which means 1 minus cosine squared is equal to sine squared. So 1 minus cosine squared is equal to sine squared. Which, as we do these, it's really kind of neat that whatever I would get here, so like if I had an expression like this, which happens, I come across weird trig expressions as we're doing stuff that's a little further up than algebra. Instead of having to plug something in 3 different places, I'm going to get the same exact answer if I just did sine squared. Okay, so this is really a lot easier to work with and a lot easier to manipulate from here on out than this ever would be. And they're always going to be the same. We just literally proved, we did a proof, an algebra proof, that this and this are the same. One can be replaced with the other. So yeah, those are your simplifying strategies. The next couple of videos are just doing a handful more examples that are on that next page to help you get comfortable with it.